Noah Sinclair, a cold and calculating tech mogul from San Francisco, was known for closing deals that others feared to touch. He thrived on competition, thriving in a world where emotions had no place. But one evening, at a private rooftop party hosted by venture capitalists, his friend and longtime business rival, Mason, dropped a challenge over a glass of bourbon. Bet you wouldn't last 6 months married to someone who has no idea who you are. No perks, no background, just you, Mason teased, grinning. Noah, never one to back down, responded, "What's the wager?" "A controlling share in Atlas Robotics," Mason said. Noah smirked. That was a tempting prize. Enter Harper Lane, a freelance photojournalist recently returned from fieldwork abroad. She was the furthest thing from Noah's usual world of shareholders and private jets. Mason arranged the meeting, and Harper, curious and bold, agreed to meet Noah on her own terms, not out of romance, but as an experiment. She wanted to study what would happen when a powerful man was stripped of his usual weapons. Their first meeting was awkward and raw. Harper, dressed plainly, met Noah at a no-frills diner. "You're here because of a bet," she said bluntly. "I agreed because I think people like you need to be pulled out of your world." Noah was taken aback by her directness, but intrigued. They agreed. 6 months of marriage. No mention of his wealth. No control over her life. And Harper would document everything anonymously for a future feature story about power and transformation. What started as mutual manipulation turned into a war of stubborn wills. Noah tried to sway Harper with comfort and convenience. She rejected every gift. Harper, in turn, documented his every vulnerable moment. They went on long walks through the city, often in silence. Harper insisted on using public transportation, and Noah, though initially resistant, began to observe more of the world around him. He watched how people interacted, how kindness wasn't currency, but character. Harper pointed out moments, small acts of generosity, people helping each other with groceries, a bus driver who waited for a running passenger. These moments began to shift something in him. On one particularly rainy evening, Harper took Noah to a community storytelling night. They sat shoulder to shoulder in a crowded library listening to people share tales of survival, immigration, heartbreak, and hope. One woman told a story of losing her brother to gang violence, but ended with how her grief drove her to start a mentoring program. Noah didn't speak the entire night. Harper noticed he hadn't touched his phone once. In the weeks that followed, Harper challenged him further. She insisted he volunteer at her non-profit's shelter kitchen. At first, Noah worked in silence, but gradually, he began to talk to the people he served. He met a man who had once been an engineer but lost everything in the recession. That conversation stayed with him. Their private life also grew more intimate. Despite the agreement, the lines between pretense and something deeper blurred. They began to argue, not about control, but about life, about belief, about choices. Harper never let Noah get away with his usual deflections. And Noah, to his own surprise, found himself seeking her perspective. Late one night, after a dinner of lentils and rice on the balcony, Noah confessed, "When I first met you, I thought I'd break you down. I thought you'd adapt to my world." Harper looked at him, unblinking. "And now, I'm not sure I'd survive without yours." The turning point came when Harper spent a day with children at a non-profit she supported. Noah followed. He watched her light up in ways he never understood. For the first time, he saw a world beyond acquisitions. But Harper wasn't just documenting Noah. She was testing herself. She wanted to believe people could change. And slowly, Noah did. He started volunteering. He made amends with a past employee he had wronged. Not for the bet, but because Harper had shifted something inside him. One weekend, they traveled to Portland where Harper was shooting a photo essay on community urban gardens. Noah shadowed her, camera slung over his shoulder like a student. She taught him how to frame shots, how to see through the lens, not with power, but with patience. That trip marked a shift. He wasn't just tagging along anymore. He was participating. They spent evenings lying on picnic blankets, debating articles and ethics, how business could be reshaped to serve people over profits. Harper challenged Noah's worldview, and to her surprise, he didn't resist. He listened. Then came a dinner at Harper's mother's house in a small town outside Sacramento. The house was modest, filled with books and scented candles. Her mother, a retired schoolteacher, treated Noah with polite suspicion. During dinner, she asked him what his company actually did for the world. Noah stammered, his polished charm fell flat. That night, in Harper's childhood bedroom, he admitted, "I don't know if I like who I've been." Harper turned to him. Then become someone else. At the end of 6 months, Harper handed Noah a small envelope. "My final article," she said. "It's not what I expected to write." Inside was a headline, "When Power Meets Purpose." "So, what now?" Noah asked. Harper smiled. "Now, you win Atlas Robotics. And maybe, I let you take me on a second first date." Noah chuckled. No bets this time. Their story became more than an arrangement. It was a testament to what can happen when two very different people challenge each other to be more. 18 months later, the article had become a viral sensation. It was Harper's most read piece and had been picked up by several major platforms. Readers were intrigued by the anonymous billionaire who had, unknowingly, become the subject of a moral case study. Noah and Harper had remained low profile, choosing to grow their relationship away from the spotlight. They had moved into a modest loft in Oakland, a far cry from Noah's high-rise penthouse. It was Harper's choice. She wanted space that wasn't purchased with arrogance. Noah agreed without protest. Despite their unconventional start, they had built routines. Cooking together became a ritual. Harper taught Noah how to use an old film camera. Noah helped Harper edit her photos using software she used to avoid. Their lives slowly blended, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Then came the storm. A tech journalist from Silicon Valley had pieced the story together, connecting the dots between the article and Noah Sinclair. Within hours, the internet erupted. News broke that one of the richest tech CEOs had been the subject of a psychological experiment and a secret marriage. Cameras surrounded the loft. Paparazzi chased Harper for statements. Noah's board questioned his stability. Mason stayed quiet. "You said this would stay anonymous," Noah said, tension cracking in his voice one evening. "I never revealed your name." "I kept my promise," Harper replied, heartbroken by the sudden distrust. "But you wrote it. You wrote everything. You turned my life into a story." Harper stepped back. "You said it changed you. Were you only okay with it when no one knew? When it didn't affect your image?" Noah didn't answer. That night, Harper left. Weeks passed. Noah buried himself in work, but it felt hollow. Every interview, every product launch felt like a farce. He missed the way Harper challenged him, the way she didn't need him, but chose to be with him anyway. One morning, he opened a letter. Inside was a single photograph. A candid shot of him laughing at a soup kitchen, sleeves rolled up, beside a little girl. Harper had taken it. Noah drove across the state, finding her in a coastal town, working on a piece about climate change. "You found me," she said, smiling gently. "You left breadcrumbs," Noah replied. They sat on the beach, letting silence say what words couldn't. Eventually, Noah turned to her. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid that you saw too much. But now I realize that being seen by you is the only thing that ever made me real." Harper reached for his hand. "Then let's stop hiding." Noah kissed her, the ocean roaring behind them. It was no longer a bet. It was a promise. 2 years after their reunion, Harper and Noah launched a foundation, the Lane Sinclair Initiative, dedicated to ethical entrepreneurship and storytelling for impact. They traveled the world, using Harper's lens and Noah's resources to spotlight people doing extraordinary things in silence. They returned to Portland, this time to sponsor the urban gardens Harper had once photographed. Noah helped design a platform to fund community food projects. Harper led workshops for young photographers. In Nepal, they documented solar panel installations in remote villages. In Brazil, they interviewed rainforest activists. At night, they shared cramped guest houses, eating local meals and learning new languages together. And through every country, every interview, every shared sunset, they kept learning about each other. Noah still had sharp edges. Harper still pulled away when things felt too overwhelming. But they kept choosing each other. Every single day. And that, as Harper would later write, was the only bet worth making. They didn't stop there. With the Lane Sinclair initiative gaining traction, invitations began pouring in from universities, summits, media outlets. But Harper was wary of celebrity. She insisted their work speak louder than their names. Still, the pull of public curiosity was strong. They agreed to one major appearance, a TEDx talk in San Diego. On stage, they shared their story. Noah candid about the bet and its consequences, Harper about her reasons, fears, and hope. The crowd gave a standing ovation not because it was a love story, but because it was honest. Afterward, emails flooded in from readers and viewers, a teacher in Ohio who played the talk for his class, a woman in Mumbai who said it gave her the courage to leave a toxic marriage, a young man in Nigeria who said it inspired him to build tech for good. But it wasn't all admiration. There were critics, too. Some accused Harper of exploiting Noah for a story. Others said Noah's redemption arc was too convenient. They didn't respond. Instead, they doubled down on the work. Back in Oakland, they adopted a rescue dog, whom they named Pixel. He became a mascot for their travels. He would sit by Harper's feet during interviews, rest his head on Noah's lap during long flights. Pixel wasn't just a dog, he was a quiet presence, a grounding reminder of normalcy. Then, unexpectedly, Harper's mother fell ill. They paused everything to care for her. Noah took on the bulk of logistics, doctor appointments, home renovations, hospice consultations. It wasn't glamorous. There were no headlines. But Harper watched him, this man who had once chased billion-dollar mergers, kneeling beside her mother's bed, feeding her soup. One night, Harper whispered, "If my mother could see you now, really see you, she'd know I made the right choice." Noah simply kissed her forehead. She already knew. When her mother passed peacefully in spring, they planted a small garden in her honor. Lavender, rosemary, and tulips. Harper took photos of the process, then put the camera down and simply sat with the soil. Noah held her hand, saying nothing. Months later, Harper published a photo book, The Quiet Work. It wasn't about Noah. It wasn't about herself. It was about everything in between, the people who carry on, the small gestures, the silent rebuilding. The last image in the book, a candid shot of Noah, hair messy, sleeves rolled, wiping sweat from his brow as he dug a hole for a rose bush. The caption read, "He's still learning. So am I." They continued to travel, build, document, and learn. Sometimes they argued. Sometimes they cried. But always, they returned to that early agreement. Respect, honesty, independence, and above all, choice. A year later, Harper was invited to teach a semester-long course at a journalism school in New York. At first, she hesitated. The idea of settling anywhere for a few months felt foreign. But Noah encouraged her. "I'll come with you," he said. "We can rent a place in Brooklyn. I'll work remotely. Pixel will love Prospect Park." Harper laughed. "You? In Brooklyn? Consider it another experiment." So they went. The city, with all its chaos and culture, offered something new. Harper lectured 3 days a week and spent her evenings grading essays and mentoring students. Noah found a rhythm at a co-working hub, consulting startups on ethical scaling. They found a favorite coffee shop, a quiet rooftop where they read, and an old couple downstairs who taught them to play chess. Brooklyn wasn't forever, but it reminded them how adaptable they'd become, how their love had stretched and grown through every new setting. They began to talk, not just about the next country or project, but about something more permanent. One evening, walking along the East River, Harper turned to Noah. "Have you ever thought about kids?" Noah didn't flinch. "Yes," he said simply, "but only with you." They didn't rush, but they began to imagine. A home with photos taped to the fridge. A life that didn't rely on airports and conferences, but one that revolved around breakfast tables and bike rides. Harper's hand often drifted to her belly without her realizing it. Noah noticed and smiled. Months later, they found themselves in a small town in northern Vermont for a winter retreat. It was a spontaneous decision. driven by Harper's desire to photograph snow-covered forests and Noah's wish to disappear from the public eye for a while. They rented a rustic cabin surrounded by pine trees, the only sounds coming from wind, firewood crackling in the hearth, and the crunch of snow under Pixel's paws. The isolation brought clarity. In the quiet, they had longer conversations about legacy, fear, and whether love was still evolving or simply settling in. One morning, Harper sat by the window, sketching in a journal. "What are you drawing?" Noah asked. "Plans," she said with a grin. "Or dreams. Depends on how you look at it." He looked over her shoulder, a sketch of a small house with a large garden, a treehouse tucked in the back, and two figures sitting under a shaded porch. "Looks familiar," he said. "It should. It's us. Someday." He wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Let's make it real." When they returned to California, they began searching, not just for property, but for purpose. Harper wanted a community that welcomed storytelling and art. Noah wanted to invest in local youth programs, build mentorship pipelines in tech without strings attached. They settled in a quiet town along the coast, buying a fixer-upper with enough space for a photo studio, a vegetable garden, and maybe, eventually, a nursery. Noah spent mornings restoring wood beams and patching old brickwork with local craftsmen. Harper roamed antique stores, searching for frames, fabrics, and forgotten tools she could repurpose. In the evenings, they hosted neighbors for potlucks. Slowly, strangers became friends. Then came the news. Harper was pregnant. The moment the test turned positive, she froze. Not out of fear, but out of reverence. She waited for the right time to tell Noah, on a sunny morning with coffee in bed and Pixel curled at their feet. He looked at the test, then at her, and said only, "We're ready." Harper cried. Not because she was overwhelmed, but because she finally believed it. The months that followed were full of change. Noah scaled back work even more. Harper documented every step of her pregnancy with her camera and her words. They spoke to the baby through belly bumps, played jazz in the nursery, and debated names while painting the walls. When their daughter, Iris, was born, the world felt still. She had Harper's eyes, Noah's chin, and a scream that could rival a jet engine. But to them, she was perfect. She was the result of every conversation, every compromise, every moment of growth. Their love story hadn't followed tradition. It began with a bet, nearly ended in betrayal, but was ultimately rebuilt on a foundation of truth, resilience, and choice. Parenthood transformed them again. The first weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and 3 a.m. lullabies. Harper, always composed, found herself undone by small things. A diaper she couldn't quite fasten, the sound of Iris crying longer than expected, the way she missed the solitude that once defined her identity. Noah stepped in without hesitation. He learned to swaddle like a pro, memorized the baby carrier manual, and even perfected the art of one-handed coffee making. More importantly, he learned to listen without needing to fix everything. Harper needed that. They created new rituals. Sunday morning walks through the farmer's market with Iris strapped to Noah's chest. Afternoons on the porch where Harper would sketch while Iris napped in a basket nearby. Evenings where they read aloud, children's books at first, then novels they loved, believing that Iris could absorb the rhythm of storytelling. Noah kept a journal too. It started out as a simple way to track Iris's milestones but evolved into letters. Each entry was addressed to her, capturing what he noticed, what he hoped, and what he feared. It was his quiet way of passing on what he never got to say to his own father. One rainy evening, Harper opened the notebook and read a few entries. "You write to her like she's already grown," she said. "I want her to know the man I became because of her," Noah replied. The days blurred, but the bond only deepened. One night, while Harper rocked Iris by the window, she whispered, "We're building something she'll grow inside of, not just a house but a way of living." Noah stood behind her. "Something we never had." They began thinking about the world Iris would inherit. Their foundation expanded to include educational programs for parents, especially those in underserved communities. They partnered with doulas, teachers, mental health counselors. Harper documented their stories. Noah handled logistics and funding. They wanted to leave more than money, they wanted to leave tools. When Iris turned 1, they hosted a celebration not in a ballroom or hotel, but at the community center they helped renovate. There were paper lanterns, homemade pies, live music by a local band, and a photo wall filled with moments from their journey. Snapshots of love forged not in perfection, but persistence. Mason came, too. He brought a simple gift, a weathered copy of a classic children's book. No speeches, just a quiet nod to Noah. Later that night, as the guests left and Iris slept soundly, Harper and Noah sat on the porch. "Do you ever think about how it all started?" Harper asked. "All the time," Noah said. She leaned into him. "Would you do it again?" "Only if it led me back to this exact moment."